continue down the path of the Yellow Brick Road as we explore more of Neverland, and maybe at the end of it we'll start a fight with a raccoon. Although there's a few inaccuracies in that statement, that is kind of a good summary of this episode. But before we get into it, I will say spoiler warning for those who have not seen episode 2 of RWBY Volume 9. I won't be showing the episode or any clips from it in this video, simply images of the episode and analyzing the events that take place. I'll leave a link in the description below so you guys can go to Crunchyroll, so you can watch the episode there and support this amazing series. Now episode 2 starts off immediately after the end of episode 1, where Blake has just exclaimed that she believes they're in a fairy tale. And at first, no one really buys that. RWBY says that's impossible, and then everyone looks at the talking mouse on her shoulder. And so Weiss decides to categorize everything that they've been through. RWBY made friends with a talking mouse, Blake and Weiss were attacked by vines, and Yang, well, what exactly happened to her? Oh right, she had her arm stolen by a talking raccoon riding a purple wagon that was filled with trash. And then Weiss concedes the point. She understands that point of view and then goes to storm off and kind of try to categorize things in the corner. The comedic moments continue from the first episode into this one, and I feel like this is going to be a continuing thing throughout Volume 9. May not be everyone's thing, but I'm certainly enjoying it thus far, and there are a few more to come in this episode. Blake then recognizes the series of events that they've been through, that they are the same events that Alex experienced in the fairy tale The Girl Who Fell Through the World, and she surmises that they are actually in the Ever After. And Little confirms this, saying, yeah, the Ever After is where I live. Even though everyone else thinks it's impossible that they could be in a book, the similarities they can't deny. In the fairy tale, Alex met the hunter mice. She was trapped by vines, fought a Jabberwocker, and had her dagger stolen by a talking raccoon. And we also get to find out the sequence of events that happened afterwards. Alex then encountered the Red King and beat the king at a board game, then encountered the Curious Cat and the Rusted Knight, and eventually got out of the Ever After through the tree. So we kind of have a sequence of events that are going to unfold in, well, RWBY Volume 9. Though things are probably going to go off the rails, considering even though they're sort of following the events of the fairy tale, they're more than just one person. There's all 4 members of Team RWBY, and we still have yet to see Jean and Neo, who are absolutely going to have their own parts to play as well. But none of them know to look for Jean, as none of them think that Jean is actually in this world, and none of them really want to look for Neo, so they're more focusing on their own issues at the moment. They can't leave yet, however, or at least try to get to the tree, because Yang's still missing her arm, Ruby's still missing Crescent Rose, and Little pipes up saying, oh, the Jinxie Peddler probably has it. Who of course is unknown to everyone else, but Little says that's the only talking raccoon I know. So, given the odds, I think it's a safe bet that that's who they're looking for. And that is who they are going to go meet. On their way there, Blake goes into a little bit more detail about the girl who fell through the world. That Alex caused a lot of trouble because she didn't know the customs of that world, and essentially started a war among the townsfolk when she went to confront Jinxie the Peddler. That was one of the morals of the story in and of itself. Yang also points out that Alex wasn't exactly a good person. She was kind of mean, just lying and cheating her way throughout the entire story. Blake says, regardless, we need to play things safe, which, you know, I'm pretty sure most people can surmise things aren't exactly going to go as planned. Not that they have at any point in RWBY, really. Weiss then pipes up and asks Yang, okay, how exactly did they get the better of you to take your arm? And ultimately, they just found Yang when she was unconscious after she had just come to that world, and when she woke up, the raccoon was already riding away on his wagon, arm in hand, so Yang really didn't have a chance to counterattack. And so she's looking forward to getting her chance at the raccoon once again. For the moment, though, Blake starts joking with Yang, saying that the raccoon, you could say, caught you unarmed. And Blake and Yang kind of joke and flirt with one another. Something that Weiss notices and says, you know, it's about time. But RWBY has no idea what she's referring to, doesn't notice this at all, and is too caught up with her own thoughts, which is very significant for, I think, how this volume is going to play out. First and foremost, Bumblebee had better happen this volume. They're laying it on thick already. It needs to happen by the end of this volume. It's practically confirmed. I mean, Weiss did just confirm it right in this scene, so, you know, just kiss already, literally. But the fact that RWBY is not paying attention to anyone or really anything else around her, she's too caught up in her own thoughts, her own failings, her own shortcomings, is what I think the focus of this volume is going to be. It is a nonsensical world, and things are going to be a little bit fun, colorful, and wild, but the point of this volume is going to be exploring our characters, in particular RWBY. And although she didn't really understand what Weiss was referring to, she then responds to Weiss saying, "Don't worry, we'll find a way out and get back home." But with that comment, Weiss stops in her tracks. She lost everything. There is no home for her to return to, just like Beacon. Though Weiss does have a home with the rest of her team, and hopefully the rest of her family made it through, the home that she knew, the home that she had grown up in, is gone. Atlas does not exist anymore, just like Beacon is gone and there is no returning to it. She is a little bit at a loss, and RWBY tries to comfort her, saying, "Weiss, you did everything you could to save Atlas." Notably, and I don't know if this was intentional or I'm reading too much into it, RWBY says that you did everything you could to save Atlas. Saying that to Weiss, but only saying Weiss. It's not we did everything we could to save Atlas. And I'm wondering if that distinction is important, because RWBY is being very hard on herself, very caught up in her own thoughts and shortcomings, as I mentioned. And I'm wondering if she thinks that she made a lot of wrong choices. She made some for sure, and she didn't achieve everything that she wanted to, but if she's being too hard on herself and that is actually coming out in the way that she's speaking to her team, just something that hasn't been caught on by everyone else quite yet. At RWBY's comment, though, Weiss continues, saying that they don't even know if they succeeded, if they were able to prevent the relics from falling into enemy hands, if Jean and Winter were able to succeed despite everything, despite us. So all of them are being hard on themselves, but RWBY in particular is kind of focusing on herself more than anything. And then Weiss continues saying about Penny. That was a lot to take in all at once, but RWBY doesn't respond to this. She just looks dejected and starts walking away. RWBY doesn't want to confront her own emotions. She's losing hope, she's losing strength, and I think also losing touch with her team a little bit. So there's, as we've known for a long time, there's a lot that we're going to have to explore with RWBY's character throughout this volume. And then they arrive at a rickety bridge covering the ravine between the two kind of like tiles, I guess. And when we see the overall layout of the Ever After, there's multiple different sections that are kind of self-contained worlds of sorts. Little refers to them as acres, so they are trying to get to the next acre where this town is and Jinxie the Peddler is. And to do that, they just need to cross this rickety bridge. Nothing really comes of the bridge itself, but it is noted that this is the farthest that Little has ever been from their home. So RWBY suggests, well, maybe you should turn back then. And Little's response to this, I think, is very significant to the overall way that the Ever After works. Little just simply says, I have no idea how to get back, even if I wanted to, so maybe I'll just live here next to the bridge. And Little starts building a house. Little has no idea how to go back, no real desire to go back. In the Ever After, I don't think you can go back. Just like as you're following the events of the story, well, they only progress in one direction. Sure, we as the readers can flip the pages back, but the characters within the book can never go back. And so I think maybe that's relevant here, that Little just actually cannot go back to their village. So, I'm curious to see how that's going to play out and if that does carry over to the future episodes and future events of the show, because, well, that's probably going to be pretty significant, especially since we know that space is a little bit distorted. If they try to force their way to the tree, doesn't exactly work, as we saw with RWBY in the first episode, and we'll see a little bit later on. So we'll discover more about the world as, well, our characters do as well. In the end, Weiss goes up to Little and invites them along with them. As Little's house collapses behind them, they kind of agree that, yeah, that's probably for the best. So all of them venture forth into the next acre, which is obviously reminiscent to, like, the Red Queen from the Alice in Wonderland stories, and I'm also wondering if it's intentionally similar to the Forest of Forever Fall back at Beacon Academy. We do know that Volume 9 is kind of supposed to be a little bit of a return to Beacon, or at least that feeling, a bit of a reprieve from the gravity of the situation and the darkness that we experienced in Volume 8. So maybe it's reminiscent of that intentionally. Regardless, though, they are able to make their way to the town. A very fairy tale town, to say the least, where all of the people seem to be toys of some sort, many of which seem to just be plastic figurines. Not really seeming to have much mobility. It's not like Team RWBY really interacts with them all that much. They just try to blend in, seem natural, and try not to cause a commotion, as Blake doesn't want to repeat the events of the fairy tale and cause the problems that Alex did in The Girl Who Fell Through the World. But, still, it's an interesting town, to say the least, and as Team RWBY is traveling throughout it, they see bulletins that are posted throughout the town saying that by royal decree, the birthday party of His Most Royal is hereby announced. So the king is just toting around his birthday to the rest of his subjects, probably expecting all of them to worship him and shower him with gifts, as we do see his soldiers are absolutely trying to do. In the center of town square, we see Jinxie the peddler, the raccoon at his trolley, and he brings out a number of items that he's putting up for sale. Weiss actually thinks he's cute, but Blake notes that he looks older than what he did in the fairy tale story, meaning that very likely Team RWBY and everyone was transported to the Ever After at a time after Alex had already been there, much later in time. The raccoon is obviously aged, and if Alex did follow this exact same path, met with the mice village, the same one that they did, then it would explain why Little has no memory of Alex, because they did ask Little earlier on in the episode, "Do you know anyone named Alex?" And Little had no idea. That would be because Little is still young. Little would not have been old enough to remember Alex, or may not have even been born yet. So this story is quite literally following in the footsteps of Alex, as was shown in the Volume 9 opening. But at the same time, the events are unfolding the exact same way. So things aren't working in a linear way in terms of time in the Ever After, which when things are going to be thrown off the rails, likely by Neo, then that means things could get jumbled. Maybe they will encounter Alex, maybe things will turn out differently, and that only makes me more curious as to how this volume is going to unfold, and I'm really looking forward to being able to watch all of Volume 9, like, sequentially. At this point, though, Jinxie reveals the 3 items that he's putting up for auction, none of which are Yang's arm. Blake, who seems to be the most knowledgeable about the fairy tale, says that Jinxie always masked the items that he was selling to seem more valuable, and so that people would be more likely to give Jinxie what he's asking for them. The way that this overall auction works is whoever says they want it, Jinxie will request pretty much whatever he wants in return. There is no currency in the Ever After, so things like memories and emotions are completely fair play. Yang obviously doesn't see her arm there, but that scepter kind of looks arm-sized, and as the audience, we can kind of see similarities between the arm that she had and the scepter. Has the same yellow aesthetic, still has the red crystals in it to symbolize the burn dust that were from the weapon, so it's definitely the scepter that is the arm, but that's not the only object that catches someone's interest. RWBY is drawn to the little jade puppet that is there. Something about it just is speaking to her or drawing her there. And Yang asks Blake what Alex had to offer in return for the item that she wanted back from Jinxie, the dagger that she lost. Blake says that it was her saddest memory and her happiest that she had to give up to get her dagger back. And as the first item goes up for auction, which is the diamond-studded rabbit, we see a random member of the crowd offer to get it. And the price for that was a hug. A simple hug. Nothing too complex to any one of us, but Little points out that a hug is very valuable. So hugs and emotions do hold more power in the Ever After, as we've seen before. With RWBY, when she cried, the world responded. It started raining, so essentially the world cried too. And if hugs hold power, then maybe the emotion of hope, the emotion of friendship and love will hold power as well, and maybe friendship will be the key for them escaping the Ever After. As the scepter goes up for auction next, though, Yang's not the only one who bids for it. A soldier from the Red King's army is also bidding for it. And the soldier simply exclaims, "This is going to be a present for His Majesty the Red King." And since 2 people bid on the item, it comes down to whoever wants to give Jinxie what he wants first. And the price of this golden scepter is what it feels like to be loved. They'd have to give that up to Jinxie to be able to get the scepter. Yang obviously hesitates on this. We saw earlier in the episode that Bumblebee's becoming canon. She does love Blake, and Blake loves her. That feeling of being loved, Yang doesn't want to give that up. And not only Blake, but also RWBY, her sister, the rest of her team, and the love that she's experienced throughout her life. She knows she's loved. I wouldn't want to give that up either. And the soldier does so unhesitatingly, because it's for the king. So whatever Jinxie wants is what Jinxie gets. Yang is kind of upset by this. She did it Blake's way, now it's her turn. But before Yang can go knock the soldier's head off his shoulders, the auctioning for the third item begins, and RWBY immediately puts up her hand. She is drawn to that item. The rest of her team is kind of confused as to why, but that'll be revealed in a moment. The cost of this item, however, the raccoon says enough hope to fill up this jar. And RWBY, you can see her head fall. And the raccoon notes, you don't even have enough, do you? This blatantly shows, in no subtle manner, that RWBY has lost hope. After the crushing defeat of Atlas, after losing Penny in particular, RWBY's lost hope. She doesn't know how to continue, and she knows this herself. She knows she's lost hope, and we'll see if the rest of her team recognizes that as well, considering she didn't have enough hope to fill that jar. It didn't really matter, though, as while Jinxie was distracted, Little pulled the jade puppet and was essentially planning on stealing it. But according to Little, that's not exactly stealing. While they were on their way to the town, it was mentioned that Jinxie comes by the mouse village every once in a while, and Yang commented, "Oh, does he steal things from you too?" And Little said, "No, he doesn't steal. He just takes things when we're not looking. Fair is fair." And so, fair is fair this time as well. Jinxie wasn't looking, and so Little took it. And the raccoon, of course, gets very upset at this, saying, "You can't take that, or you can't touch it until the deal is struck." And then the magic wears off. The jade puppet turns back into Penny's blade. Something, of course, that RWBY very much recognizes. And the other items turn back as well. The scepter was in fact Yang's arm, and the diamond-studded rabbit was actually another mouse from Little's tribe, presumably. So Jinxie can not only steal inanimate objects when people isn't looking, but also just take other living things and then mask them as inanimate objects. What kind of power does Jinxie have in this world? I assume we're probably going to find out later because, well, now that things are disrupted, Team RWBY has started a riot in front of Jinxie's auction house. Yang goes and takes her arm back from the soldiers, and RWBY runs up to the stage and grabs Penny's blade. Is very happy to have something reminiscent of her friend, and you can tell in the look that she gives Little that she's very appreciative of Little's efforts to get that back for her. But then we see everyone else running by her. Yang's happy that she got her arm, Blake is freaking out, and Weiss is just strolling along like she's fed up with the place. And RWBY runs after them. We see the raccoon not very happy with them, so he's most likely going to come back later in the volume to seek revenge or get compensation for the items that were stolen and the ruckus that they caused. But we do see that he's kind of an honest peddler. He's caught in the lie, and he ends up returning the hug to the person that gave him the hug in exchange for the diamond-studded rabbit. So he at least will try to make things right if he's caught in the lie. And I'm curious to see whether Jinxie is going to end up being an antagonist. He certainly seems like he might be, given that he's going to seek vengeance on Team RWBY for the disruption that they caused. But the way that he said, "You don't even have enough, do you?" when he requested RWBY to give enough hope to fill up this jar, it almost sounded like he felt bad for RWBY. Or at the very least, he was surprised that she didn't have that much hope, that she had no hope. Maybe hope is something that everyone has to some degree in the Ever After, and RWBY's an abnormality not having that hope. And maybe Jinxie might actually help her along the way. Considering he's a peddler, goes around and collects odd items that he thinks are valuable, he might actually be the one to find Crescent Rose for RWBY and return it to her at some point in the future, and thus try to give her hope for the future, that things will work out in the end. Maybe we'll have to see, maybe I'll make a theory video on that in the future. They all take off and run to the forest. Yang's pretty happy with how things turned out, had a little fun causing a commotion, and is asking people to high-five her arm. Of course no one does, as Blake is freaking out that they are doing the exact same thing Alex did in the fairy tale. She read a ton of stories, but Blake never thought that she would be the moral of one. And, well, I think that's going to be pretty significant for how things play out here. They're going to recognize the moral of their own stories. That no matter how hard you try, you may not succeed. But no matter how many times you get knocked down, it's getting back up and continuing to try that is what's most important. At least, that's one of the morals they're probably going to recognize. RWBY herself needs to recognize that, and I'm sure there's going to be many more along the way. RWBY then sits down next to Blake, saying that she was drawn to Penny's weapon, and becomes sad once again. The weather changes to a storm, and the overall color of the world seems to almost drain out of it. RWBY is now sadder than what she had been before, at least according to how the world responded. Weiss then says, okay, we just need to get out of here then. Alex went to the tree, let's try going to the tree. And so Weiss tries to do the exact same thing RWBY tried to do last episode. Force her way there. And so she walks off one side of the screen only to come back out through the other side. She does it once more and gets frustrated. So she grabs a rock and throws it, and it comes around and knocks her out, it seems like. And the animation here, and also just Weiss lying unconscious on the ground afterwards, I gotta say, that certainly made me laugh. As I mentioned before, the jokes may not be for everyone, but I'm certainly enjoying them, even if they do seem a little bit out of character. But that didn't last long, as they heard the soldiers coming in the distance. And so RWBY asked Blake what Alex did next. Blake says, well, she went to the Crimson Castle and beat the Red King at his own game. So that is what they decide to do. When the soldiers show up, RWBY requests that they be brought to the birthday party. And the soldiers say, sure, we'll bring you there as prisoners for stealing the birthday present that was gonna go to the king. So RWBY offers something even more valuable. The weapon of a powerful warrior. But not just a powerful warrior. The most powerful warrior. Someone who was touched by magic. Who sacrificed herself to save thousands, who took a message of hope up to the sky and saw the world through better eyes. This hurt to hear because it did describe how wonderful Penny is and what RWBY truly thinks about her. But she was willing to give up this blade that she felt that connection to help the rest of her team escape. And the soldiers are absolutely touched by this story as well. They agree with RWBY, they take the sword and say, onward, we have a birthday party to attend. But this act, I don't think, is as selfless as it might seem. As RWBY then says, we're in a world where we seem to be experiencing everything that Alex went through. We may as well just follow along and stop pretending like we know what we are doing. And that is the note that the episode ends on. The message is quite clear in my mind. RWBY has blatantly given up hope. She doesn't see any way forward. She may as well just go along with it and just stop trying to change things. She's stopped fighting. She stopped trying to think of new solutions. The rest of her team still has that hope, still trying to come up with ways to go about things, but RWBY's just kind of resigning herself to the way things are. She is reaching her low point. I don't think she's there yet. This episode certainly pulled at the heartstrings, had some funny moments, and definitely some sad ones, but I think RWBY is sinking lower, and she still has further to go before she'll be eventually pulled out of that darkness. I hope, at least. There's no guarantee. Given how things unfolded in Atlas, things could definitely take a turn for the worse permanently, but I think we're going to be raised up a little bit before getting plunged into Vacuo, where it will be the final battle against Salem. Overall, though, I really did enjoy this episode. Between the first two episodes, it doesn't really seem like that much has happened. We've definitely slowed down from the events of Atlas, and for a lot of people that may seem boring, but it's good to slow down every once in a while, and although episode to episode, it may not feel like much is progressing, I'm sure that later in the volume things are definitely going to pick up, and it'll make a lot more sense and feel a lot more fluid when you can string all of the episodes together once the entire volume is released. But for now, we're just exploring the world of the Ever After. We've met a new character in Jinxie the Peddler, and are on our way to meet the Red King, obviously inspired by the Red Queen, quite possibly also the Queen of Hearts, because in the overall domain that we see at the end of the episode, it does seem like some of the pillars maybe have heart shapes in them, so maybe this is a character inspired by both the Red Queen and the Queen of Hearts. We'll have to see in the next episode. And we also got to see a little bit more of Little's outlook on the world, that, well, they can't go back to their own village because they have no idea how to, and so they're quite okay with settling down wherever and trying to find their purpose. So again, that purpose is going to be significant to how things unfold in the Ever After. RWBY has lost her purpose. She's lost her hope and she's lost her way forward. So she's going to have to rediscover that, and maybe it'll be something new in the Ever After. Give her that new outlook on life. See the world with better eyes, maybe. I also can't help but wonder if the emotions and the memories that Jinxie is collecting in exchange for all of the objects that he's auctioning off have something to do with Jinxie finding his own purpose. Whether he's been searching for years since Alex was there. Maybe the disruption Alex caused has set him on a path where he needs to find his purpose again, collect these memories for some reason. He has to be doing something with those memories and with those emotions, and that's probably going to play a factor later on. And the last thing I want to touch on in this video is the fact that all of Team RWBY now know exactly where they are. They're in the Ever After, which is the setting of a fairy tale that all of them read when they were kids. It seems a little bit jarring that they now know precisely what is happening and what to anticipate in the future. The fact that Blake was the one who had read a lot of stories and is most familiar with this one, even though it wasn't really mentioned before, it seems a little out of left field. But if it's a popular fairy tale and they all knew what Ozpin was referring to back at the end of Volume 8, then it does make sense. I feel like a little bit more context could have been given on that so it didn't feel so disjointed, but it's interesting to see how it's going to unfold. They're obviously in this world, they know the events that they should be able to anticipate, but things are also different. The raccoon peddler is older, and obviously things are going to go off the rails, as well as the overall question, how did they end up in this world? My best guess at this point in time, considering it was emphasized that this is a story they all read when they were kids, that this is a world that is familiar to all of them, including Jean and Neo. As we know, Neo did read that book when she was a child. It was explicitly mentioned in Roman Holiday, probably for this reason, and very likely Jean also read that fairy tale at some point in his past. Or maybe he didn't, and that's why he loses his identity when he comes to this world. Whereas Team RWBY and Neo would take the place of Alex because they know the story, and things could work out in numerous different ways, which is really feeding my curiosity for what happens next in this volume. But again, we will have to wait and see how it all goes. But let me know down in the comments below what you guys think of episode 2 of RWBY Volume 9, the more that we are exploring the Ever After. What was your favorite part of this episode? How did you like Jinxie the Peddler? And what do you think about the character interactions that we are seeing between Team RWBY in this volume so far? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. And if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and join the Guild of the Eternal Flame. If you're interested in the series No Game No Life, make sure to subscribe to my second channel, The Daily Flugel. And if you want to see some games played live, make sure to check out my Twitch channel as well. I stream every Tuesday and Saturday. With that being said though, I'll see you guys in the next video.